what did an invitation look like?
So it'd be like, oh, we're going to study numbers and...
Sweet. No wonder you had to invite 3 to get one to come. You're lucky it wasn't 20.
Pull up, like beaming on the place. Push up, darkness flee from the place. Pull up, like beaming on the place. Push up, darkness flee from the place.
Hello, friends. Today I'm talking with one of my best friends in the whole world. I was doing the math today, and I have known this guy for almost 30 years. We met summer of 1989, and we were at the same church, same school in middle school and high school, same school and same church. And then we parted ways for university, but God has kept our hearts kind of close together and same passions. And it's a real pleasure to have my friend Chris Wang on the podcast. What's up, Chris?
Hi. It's good to be here.
Awesome. I think probably more than anyone I've ever known, Chris has always emphasized community. And he certainly understood long before I did that the natural habitat of a Christian was to be in community with other Christians, and not the community where it's Sunday morning meet for an hour or two together and not see each other again, but the kind of community that's really kind of up close and personal. And so, because I'm talking about tips for leading small groups, honestly, there's nobody I know who I feel like is better qualified to offer some tips on leading small groups, because Chris has done it, I just think, better, honestly, Chris, better than anyone I know. And I mean that. I'm not just saying that because we're making this recording. I really, really mean that. So maybe, Chris, just you want to offer a little background, like how long you've been doing small groups and what started that in your heart and kind of your journey a little bit? Sure,
yeah. So I think you and we've been involved in small groups, at least participating in them since our youth days. Our youth group was already kind of a small group in some sense, but it was around my college years when I started actually leading small groups, my sophomore year in college. So I was trying to do the math, and it's been like 22 years or something that when I first started leading small groups. So it's been a long time.
Nice. And was that just because someone asked you to do it, or was that something more internally driven? And I'm thinking back, and I guess that would be in a more formal sense, but I remember very clearly, like, you were always kind of instigating get-togethers in high school, and you always enjoyed bringing people together, right?
Right. So yeah, in high school it was natural. I discovered like a lot of different principles around organizing. But yeah, I always loved bringing people together, trying to get time together and getting to know people a little more deeply than, sitting around in a circle in a Sunday school class, or sitting in a pew or a chair as the preacher kind of gave a sermon. So I've always enjoyed that. And in high school, I guess this is kind of a little early tip for small group organizers, but I discovered that when organizing something, only like 20 or 30% of people would actually come. And first I felt really sad about I'm like, oh, no one's coming to my thing. And then I realized, oh, it's more just people are busy or have things. And so if I wanted a group of, and so even now when I try to coordinate small groups, if I'm trying to coordinate a group of like 10 people, then I'm like, oh, I might need to invite around 30 people or so to get a group of 10 and not feel rejected.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always loved that. And in college was more when I started formally leading, I guess, small groups. I was part of a couple different Christian fellowships then, and was asked, I was always very hyper active and hyper involved in those Christian fellowships, but I was asked to lead a group. And that's kind of when I first started leading formally.
Where do you think that came from, that just that kind of enjoyment of building those deeper relationships? Because you were always really intentional. And like I remember being with you in high school and just kind of scratching my head about that. Like, why does this guy want to try and get to know everybody so badly? But you were like really intentional about getting to know people, both people in the church and your friends at school. Like you developed really good friendships with people who didn't share your faith. Have you ever, kind of internalized that or asked yourself, why am I like that? Why? Because I don't think that's necessarily normal, right?
Yeah, that's a hard question. So I think some of it probably comes from family. Actually, a lot of it probably comes from family. I am a middle child, so at least in that regard, middle children tend to want more connections and tend to just naturally connect more. So I think that might play a part. But I think some of it is just how the Lord has also created me, and that's to be someone who really enjoys people. Like I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an extrovert, but I really enjoy getting to know people, going deep with them, and even going shallow with them is enjoyable at times too.
Nice. Yeah, that's true, because I wouldn't call you an extrovert either, and yet you're really good at just building kind of more meaningful. Of course, it's always a two-way street, right? Like you can't make someone go there, but I think as much as anyone I've ever known, you're willing to make yourself available to others to let the relationship go as deep as they're willing. Mm. So when you started getting people together, like what were kind of some of the first initial experiences for you?
Oh yeah, so leading small groups and just leading in general is great because you get a lot of feedback. Like I remember, like that same year, I organized a mission trip to Mexico, and it had adults like on the team, and I was an 18 or 19-year-old then, and I was coordinating and doing things, and I got feedback like, Chris, like the way you're doing this is not conducive to adults. Like we need more of a bigger picture. We need to know what's going on. We can't just fly by the seat of our pants. And so, yeah, so those early on small groups, especially with different demographics than I was used to, they were great because, if you take it too seriously and you're like, oh, everything needs to be perfect, then it can be kind of sad. But if you expect there to be some rough edges and it's a learning process, and we're in this together. So not as a leader, I'm not trying to build the perfect group, but as a leader, I'm trying to stoop below people and link arms with them and walk forward with them. Then it's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for enjoyment along the way. And I think especially early on that was what we experienced. We were just trying things out, experimenting, and realizing, hey, we're not very good at this, but we want to do it together.
And it's interesting that you mentioned from that, even those first small groups, that you were organizing mission trips, because that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you and hear your thoughts on small groups, because one of the hallmarks of every group I've ever seen you lead is that there's always an outreach component to it. Like that I'm aware of, you've never had a small group that didn't end up going on a mission trip, serving the community. And I'll give you, I really want to hear about some of the things your groups have done. But like when you first started getting those people together, like say on those mission trips, was it generally for a project, or was it first to say do a Bible study or pray together, have accountability, and then the projects came? Like how did that unfold?
Yeah, I guess the small groups I've done, yeah, you're right. Almost every single one that I've led has had an outreach component to it. But I feel like it's kind of been a natural I don't want to say activity, but just a natural part of what the group does. So, for example, like the groups we'd often eat together. That's one of the basic things that most of our groups would do. We'd often pray together, or we'd often study the scriptures together. We'd often do outreach. It's just kind of like one of the spokes on the wheel that's part of being a small group to us.
Was that intentional? Because you haven't been to any at that time, 18, 19. You haven't gone to any formal how to lead a small group. Haven't gone to any seminary classes, whatever. So where do you think? Like, was that just kind of, you think, it already kind of built into us growing up in our denomination, or where do you think that came from?
Yeah, I think we had some of that growing up in our denomination. And then obviously you and I went to another church. Well, not obviously, but you and I went to another church sometimes and got like some extra input there. I think it actually came out of a desire to like really do life, to be alive. And there's something, at least to me, about outreach where you're engaging people with the gospel. You're engaging people with the gospel's, about life and death, and more than right and wrong or anything else. And there's something about doing life with people and giving life that makes it super exciting. And I think honestly, that's why I was doing it early on. Was like, this is so fun, and I feel energized. Everyone else feels energized. And then we're bringing life to other people.
So in those first groups, what would an invitation to someone sound like? Like if you were going to, whether it be, because you mentioned that it was different age demographics, but when you're engaging these people to get involved or to be part of what you're doing, what did that sound like? What did an invitation look like?
So it'd be like, oh, we're going to study numbers and...
Sweet. How many? No wonder you had to invite 3 to get one to come. You're lucky it wasn't 20. Okay.
Yeah. No, the pitch is more of it was kind of like, hey, let's get together. And those early groups, we called them the go groups. And let's get together and let's go. Let's be on the go. And let's do life together. There's the whole church in Acts. And so we would talk about that and the breaking of bread and devoting yourself to, the teaching of the apostles and all of that. And so it really is a pitch of like, hey, let's get together. Let's link arms. Let's do life together. Let's rub shoulders. It may be uncomfortable, but it's going to be awesome. And I think that was really the draw. And in those early years too, we actually tried to limit the numbers a little bit because people did want to be involved in the group. So,
and when you start getting these groups of people together, I mean, obviously there's going to be some similarities if you're at a university and different settings, but there is some bringing these strangers together. So how'd you go about kind of initially getting people to I don't know, kind of open up or create that chemistry in the group where, I guess maybe a 2-part question. How did you do it to get people comfortable in the group? And how long do you feel like it took there to be a group chemistry where there began to be some ownership and some like ethos of, hey, this is our group? Oh, yeah.
So to me, it boils down to the goal of the group. So I've coordinated different groups. So one was like these go group style where really dedicated believers getting together, just going deep, praying for hours together, going out, doing outreach. Some other small groups. So that was the goal of that group, was to really go deep. And other small groups have been for non-believers. Like, hey, you're a believer? Sorry, you can't join this group. Maybe next time, at the end when some of these people believe, but it's only for non-believers. And so it kind of depends on the goal of the group. And with that goal in mind, that's when we start to develop the chemistry. So for example, with the secret groups, which were ones for non-believers, the goal is really like, hey, let's get together non-believers and let's allow them to ultimately explore God and explore Jesus. but explore Christianity. And so in those groups to create chemistry, like the goal is, hey, how can we get them there? What does it require? It requires vulnerability. It requires honesty, authenticity, giving people space to wrestle with whatever reservations they have, and ultimately to choose whatever they want to choose at that point. And so in those groups, like the first thing we do, and I would always do in those kinds of secret groups, is we all get together and we just go around and we ask, oh, why are you here? And I might start, since I'm the leader, or some other, if we had co-leaders, would start, so that we could lead by example, and just be vulnerable from the very beginning. This is why I'm here. This is what I struggle with. But that's for those secret groups. But really, for me, the goal is the way to curate chemistry is to align with the goal and to develop a culture that aligns with that goal. And so for different kinds of groups, it's different.
Yeah, the secret groups, that's almost like a whole other can of worms. But maybe you could talk briefly about like what would those look like, and how long would they run for? Would they go on indefinitely? Or when you started, would you invite people to say, hey, would you commit to this for a certain length of time? Oh, maybe talk a little bit about those secret groups for a minute.
Oh, right. So for most groups, most of those secret groups, especially for a secret group, you're supposed to have a fixed end date, so that people can kind of opt out. Groups can get awkward after a while. It's like, I don't know, a whole life going to something every Thursday night or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, you try to be like, okay, this is our, let's commit for this quarter, these 12 weeks or these 10 weeks. And then that's it. And then if you want to, there'll be other small groups we can have, or we could restart the group. But yeah, we would go about that way and just share, this is a fixed group with this amount of time. And obviously we'd love it for you to be there every time, but if you can't, that's fine. And it just kind of aligned the commitment level and with the goal of the group, which is really to give people a fixed opportunity to explore.
And maybe because so far it sounds like you've been describing a lot of your experience in university, and then obviously, well, we use the word obvious because it's obvious to you and me, but anyone else listening wouldn't know. But then you moved out to Washington and you bought a house for the purpose of ministry, and you had the Jesus House, and you had people who needed help of different levels living with you, and you did that. But I'm going to kind of skip over that chapter for a minute. And in the just talking about starting small groups, you eventually moved overseas. You went into a country that was not necessarily friendly to the gospel, and there were some security, I guess a security aspect of what you were going to do that you didn't want to be like on the radar of certain people in the country. So when you were there, and you're starting small groups maybe with working adults rather than college kids, can you talk about that dynamic where you're now in a foreign environment, maybe there's security concerns, but you're still trying to create this community in that same, like, okay, like you talk about having the goal and aligning people with the goal and building the culture. How does that shift now that you're working with older people who have careers, and maybe even working cross-culturally?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty similar principle, but yeah, the way it plays out is very different. So I almost think that city churches or city groups are pretty similar, even in different countries. The city is actually a little bit more of the kind of just the thing that aligns that seems common. And so for these kinds of groups, whether it's like out in where I live now or out overseas, especially with working adults, the way we would try to build that group, create the chemistry, create the authenticity and the environment there that people could grow, because that's the goal, is to like go through life and grow through life together. Would always be things like food. Because the way I view like small groups is a family. The way I view the church is a family, and so the common elements of family, hopefully and generally, are, hey, we eat, and hopefully we eat together.
Right.
But yeah, we eat, and so food is a big part of that. Being casual is pretty big. Like, we intentionally, like in the small groups we do here, we intentionally are very casual. We try not to make anything too formal because we want people to feel at home. That's a big goal of ours. And so we're very purposeful about, we'll sit on the floor, we'll have chairs and couches and stuff, but we ourselves will try to be more casual than the people who come, if it's in our, and just leading by example in terms of being authentic or being genuine. I think that's really important. So
there's something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so I was just going to wrap around to so in a foreign country, I think it's still the same. So we would and also we would want, if it's at our house, we would want our house to be something that felt like a refuge. So if it was where we lived, it was really hot in the summer, so we would have our AC cranking, and so people would actually come to our house, not just for a small group, but just they'd pop into our house for like 15 minutes to cool off, and then they'd
cool off. Nice.
In the winter when it was cold, we'd blast our heat, and then they would come to our house and warm up a little bit, drink some coffee or tea, and then take off. And that's just an intentional thing for just trying to make it feel like a family.
Yeah, there's something so powerful about eating together that is just really kind of builds connection. I can't even really explain why, but I definitely have experienced it. Okay, so as you get these small groups going, you get people together, you're beginning to create a sense of community. Talk about how you begin then to look outward at the community around you, and you begin to look for opportunities to serve.
Oh, okay. So I just want to make one more point on the creating the small group aspect.
Please, yeah.
That hopefully will be helpful to people. One other thing that I feel is very important about starting anything, especially in leadership, is that we do it if no one's there. And if no one follows us, we still find it valuable enough to do it. And so we've had small groups where one person shows up, and we'll still do it. We don't just cancel the small group and go watch a movie or something. We still do it. And if no one shows up, we still do it. And then that's how you build. And then slowly it'll build up sometimes. I mean, sometimes you have, like our last small group, we had like 30 people, but sometimes you have a huge group, but sometimes it's not easy. But you still do it, and you find the value in doing it, not in the numbers. And I think that's the same to transition over to the outreach portion. I think that's kind of the same idea with just the culture of the group and how you focus outwards as well. Is if you have one person, like our last group, we were doing a bathroom cleaning thing. So we were like trying
tell people about that. What's that mean?
So we've done these ever since college. So in college it was easier because there's frat houses and they always had nasty bathrooms. So, but yeah, we would go and we would just look for opportunities. And one of the easiest opportunities to find generally has been to clean bathrooms because people always have dirty bathrooms.
Man.
So in college,
that is so wild.
Yeah, so we'd go up to a frat house or some other kinds of houses and like, hey, I'm part of this Christian group and we want to show God's love in a practical way. Can we come by after your guys's, let's say they had a party on Saturday night. Can we come by Sunday morning and clean your guys' bathrooms? And
wow. And they thought you were nuts.
Yeah, it was great. in college. I mean, it's still great. And people still think we're crazy, but especially in college because you have like so many.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
so messy.
Oh,
Man.
Yeah, so just doing it. So like in our last group, like we had a large group. It was like 30 people in the group, and it's like, hey, we're going to do this bathroom cleaning, and only one guy signed up, but we still did it, and it was really awesome. We ended up at a Dunkin' Donuts, and my son, myself, and this other guy were there cleaning their bathrooms, and it was great.
Oh man, that's so wild. What other? Can you give some other ideas of things y'all have done? Like, so you go out, you clean bathrooms. What are some of the other things y'all have done?
Yeah, we've done a lot of because part of the goal has always been that alive factor. That like let's do something crazy, or let's do something. Obviously, not just for ourselves, but that benefits others. So we've done just a huge variety of different things, from cleaning bathrooms and gas stations and frat houses, that sort of thing. We've done prayer walking. We've done like all sorts of variations on prayer walking, where like prayer walking with oil, prayer runs, and like
nice.
One of the things that you used to do, I don't know, you maybe still do this, but like it's the prayer walk in the grocery store, where it's like, hey, can I pray for you at the cashier, and hold up the whole line. So we've done that a couple times.
Nice. Well, and I remember you had like a bicycle repair thing, right? Or like oiling people's bike chains, or right? Was there something like that?
Yeah, I kind of hesitate to mention it in public, but yeah, I was doing these midnight, or it's actually like 3 a.m. prayer with oil, and I'd be dousing the college. This is in college, the college campus with oil. And then later on, I was like noticing, I was like, man, there's all these buildings with this marks on it. And I noticed it was me.
You were the vandal. Oh my goodness.
Vandalized the university. So,
goodness. What kind of oil were you using? You were using like olive oil?
I was using like canola corn oil.
Corn oil, just like Jesus used. Yes.
So yeah, I was like, this is not as good as I want it to be, because I'm vandalizing the school. So we were trying to brainstorm, and I did a bunch of research, and I was like, bike oil, like all the bikes here are dirty. So we got training from a bike repair shop, me and a bunch of people in the group. And then I bought a bunch of bike oil, and we went off like at 3 a.m. and we were out praying for people. Well, we were oiling bikes and praying for the people who rode those bikes. And it was
so good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you would oil the bike chain, and then while you're doing it, you're praying for the person who rides the bike. And just what would those prayers sound like? So
yeah, it would be praying for, that the Lord would bless them, that on their way to class, on their way, that they would be able to, out of the busyness, they would be able to know that there's something more. And then that the Holy Spirit would come and as the oil, and would anoint them and, just affect them in their lives. And so, yeah, there's some crazy stories. Like some of our group, they got accosted by like a police, like a security guard. It's like, stop where you are. They thought you were stealing the bikes and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of good stories out of this.
Did he believe y'all when y'all told him what you were doing?
Yeah, we were like, oh, sorry, officer. We were just praying for...
I'm not trying to steal it. I'm praying for it. Yeah.
We had the cloths and we had the oil, and he believed us. He's like, okay, continue on. Just don't steal any bikes.
Wow, cool. And then, like, a lot of times, I don't know if you would have done this with all your groups, but it seems like a lot of the groups you led, there was kind of a big trip. Like, you'd plan a trip, whether that be to Mexico or to another city nearby, or, but there was kind of, a lot of times you'd take people on the road together with you, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I guess not as much. It's been a little bit more difficult recently. I don't know why. Maybe with the families. But yeah,
Sure.
we would take trips. Definitely very common to take trips to Mexico to work with YWAM there. Very common to take trips there. We would actually do quite often. We do some sort of monthly trip anyway. So even if it's like going hiking or um, board games or different kinds of events, we
Yeah.
do a monthly trip anyway. But yeah, we would take trips. When we were overseas, we would also do trips into like the different villages, and so we would take people from our small group into those. Yeah, that's been
Now,
a big component, I would say. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
What's it look like when you get so you're living overseas and there's a chance, that you might be more well off financially than the people you're leading, or there might be a gap there. What's that like when you're trying to build a small group ethos and you have some people maybe who are very well to do financially and some people who aren't? Have you encountered that as a challenge, or has that ever been a deal for you guys?
Yeah, that's been ironically at one point in our lives, like overseas, we were poorer than our neighbors, so
Nice.
it might have been a challenge the other way. But no, like I don't think it's been that big of a challenge for us. But we would actually we always try to emphasize high ownership. So a lot of different roles for people to volunteer within the group, even for the things like the food. We ask that everyone brings food almost every time. Even with a group of like 30, we basically want everyone to be involved, and maybe it's bringing like a $1 apple or something small, but yeah, it hasn't been an emphasis on it has, we need to have a lot of.
What about like if the group goes out to eat, or like you mentioned taking a trip to Mexico? How's that work if someone in the group can't afford to go?
Oh, right. So that actually has happened. So taking the group out, especially like here in the city, like there's just a lot of young adults. So we've had young adults in our group that are just out of college for a year or two. And so we'll actually pay sometimes. Like we'll know that, like we had one couple there, we saw them like discussing amongst themselves quietly, and then they ordered like the cheapest thing on the menu. And I was like, but we'll actually just, in our life situation now, sometimes we'll just pay for the whole meal, and we won't even ask them. We'll be like, it's on us this time. But then sometimes, yeah, it's a reality that for trips overseas, we'll help host fundraisers, or we'll help donate money towards fundraising for those trips. So that's how we'll offset that a little bit.
And so, like you've transitioned a lot. So you had your transition out of college, and then you transitioned overseas. You transitioned back to the States. You transitioned back overseas. You transitioned to a different city overseas, back to the States. You've actually moved. Now that I'm saying that, man, you've moved a lot, right? So when it comes time, so you're kind of an expert at getting settled in a new place, but also at having to bring closure to a group, or to say goodbye to a group, or to know when a group season, or at least your participation in it, is coming to an end. So maybe, would you mind talking about that a little bit? Just both the dynamic of going into a new place, and also the dynamic of having to step out of a group, or when it's time for a group to come to an end.
Right. I think, yeah, going into a new place, obviously, we want, or I shouldn't say obviously, but it's great to see where the Lord is moving and join Him in where He's moving, versus, just trying to start whatever up we think should be started, or that we like, right? It's not about us. And so that's kind of the mentality or the posture that's been most helpful, is to come in to a new place and, what's the Lord doing here? How can I join in? Where can I be helpful? And then in terms of small groups, joining a group, trying to understand how you can, just bring life where you are. I think that's been a big part. And then, leading a group down the road, if that's where the Lord and the church want you, then that's great. And doing that, I think part of exiting a group. So there's, if we boil it down to family, because there's all these books around, this is, have the empty chair, and, the ultimate, like in evangelical circles, like the ultimate goal is to end the group, is to multiply the group. So you don't ever want to keep that group in evangelical circles. I don't know. For me, I think I'm a little less rigid on that. I'm more along the lines of family. And so I feel like it's very healthy for families to multiply, right, through generations. It's healthy for. And so, but it's also healthy within a generation for sometimes, you got a job here? Okay, I guess you're moving over there. Or, you're going off to school now. So, okay, you're going off and doing that. So I think even within family, within a generation, it's helpful to just recognize that there's real life going on. And sometimes people need to take different roles, and that's okay. And so that's kind of how I view transitioning in and out of a group. We've actually done multiple groups with some of our friends, Sean and his wife, and he's been the one that's kind of been taken over some of these groups that we started after I've left. But just obviously it's been great to have someone who's going to help co-lead and or raise up leaders in the midst of it. And then,
how has that been a part of the groups that you led? Like what percentage of your groups generally have a co-leader?
I think it's been pretty high, almost 100% of the groups that I've led have co-leaders. I almost never want to lead it on my own, even if it's even for the non-believer groups, I would try to get non-believers to help out, with coordinating, whether it's following up with people, seeing if they're coming, or even if it's not teaching, but just helping out, hey, we're in this together. This is not just something I'm doing on my own, but this is something we're all doing together. And so I think almost 100% we've had some sort of co-leadership.
Wow, that's I think pretty insightful for me, I think. And I think maybe that also helps you confirm where you feel Father's leading you and stuff, when he provides that person or that core group of people who say, yeah, we want to do this too, is kind of a confirmation.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So as you find yourself now in a big American city, you're talking about a lot of young people around you. Life is very full. People are very affluent. How do you go about facilitating connection in an environment that is kind of opposed to it? Maybe not intentionally, but the lifestyle doesn't naturally give itself to carving out space and having deep relationships and really intentional fellowship with people. What's that been like in your current situation?
Yeah, I've noticed that people are in and out a little bit, and just forging that community sometimes can be a little bit. You can't haphazardly create community or out here in the city, and so we've been a little bit more intentional about taking a little bit more of a, I don't want to say, I guess it's a top-down approach to creating that culture. And so what I mean by that is one of the things, at least in the cities, that I've found to be very helpful to actually develop that chemistry, to develop the meaningful relationship and ultimately the commitment to each other's lives, has been to actually have prepared questions. And so, for example, what we would do is, in a lot of our groups, I would prepare 3 or 4 questions, and we would set aside about 15 minutes of our group time and just ask each other. We would go through the questions and everyone would answer. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's been really effective in terms of people opening up, everybody being able to participate.
Do you have those easily accessible? Like, do you have kind of a core set of questions that you might use, or was it different every week? And if you do, could you share them with us?
Oh yeah, so it would actually be different every week. I would actually come up with new questions every week. I just love it because part of me is like curious about people. Like I wonder what people think about that. Or so sometimes it could be and that's part of the goal is like to have some of the questions be very frivolous and operate at that shallow level. And sometimes there'd be much more personal and to operate at a deeper level. But that's the goal is to develop that chemistry and the vulnerability and to kind of force it within a city setting across the board. So for example, one question could be like, where in the world would you love to visit? Or, where would you love to do a vacation someday? And something very, very frivolous or relatively frivolous, that's very easy to answer. Oh, I'd love to go to France or because I like the Eiffel Tower or whatever it is.
Right.
And then some of them, and I try to weave it in every time, different levels, so that we can generate that real community there. But some other questions could be something more personal, like what concerns you about your future, or what are your greatest hopes for tomorrow, or what gives you life, or what gives you energy, what drains you, those sorts of questions. So yeah, and we've in the city small groups, we've always tried to really incorporate those kinds of things into break up in groups of 3 or 4 and incorporate that, because that's what sets the tone for the connection that we're aiming for, shooting for. And then the other thing, Daryl, that I was thinking of that I've been doing recently in the city groups out here has been, at least for the men in our group, I try to meet with them one-on-one at least once during the group time. So we've been doing quarterly groups or so.
I'm sorry, what's that? What do you mean you've been doing quarterly groups?
Oh, so the groups have been like, actually they've been about semester groups. So they've been about like 16 weeks or so. And then we'll end the group, and then generally the same people will sign up for the group again, but it gives people a natural
I see. Okay. So when you go into it, you say, hey, we're going to meet for this season or this 6 months. And then you kind of re-up. You give people the option to step out, and then anyone who wants can commit again.
Right. And then it gives us a little bit more of a focus on, do I want to change topics? Does someone else want to be the leader or an assistant leader or something along those lines? Do we still want to host it at our place? Gives us a few options in terms of switching up some of the structure.
Nice. And so you were saying that you're meeting, like when you have this quarterly group going, then you're trying to meet with the men one-on-one outside of the group meeting time?
Right. So actually recently, we've done a lot of external meetings outside of the meeting time. But so one of the things that I would do as the leader is I would try to meet up with at least, all the guys one-on-one outside of the time. So sometimes it was a coffee right before the meeting. Sometimes it was, some other, like a walk, some other time during the week. But normally for our group, it would be like once every week or once every 2 weeks. I would try to meet up with a different person and then go deep with that guy.
And how does that go generally? Like, because you probably don't know these people particularly well, right? You kind of know them on a casual basis.
Right. So I guess, it would just be getting to know them. I mean, the intention would be to go kind of deep. Different people have taken it different ways. Like some of the guys have been like, where do you see my career headed? And they're like looking for mentorship in terms of career.
Wow.
But some others are like, hey, these are the sins I deal with. And, let's chat about it. And so it's just been a wide range. And I just want to meet people. In general, we want to meet people where they are.
Sure.
and be willing to walk with them to a deeper level. But if they want to, just meet them where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And just in case anyone listening is wondering, you also work a full-time, like, non-ministry job. So this isn't, you're meeting with these guys, you're having these small groups. This isn't your paid vocation.
Right. Nope. It's just a joy, an outside joy.
Nice.
The other thing, Daryl, in the city that we've been doing here is also, as part of the group, we had a sign up for, because here there's especially for the young kind of working singles, we've had a sign up where it's like random get-togethers, and I would coordinate. Our group is really large, so it was like 30 people last time. So people would sign up, and then I would randomly break people up into groups of 3 and 4 and just assign them for the next 2 weeks. Hey, you guys organize this, get together and do something fun together. And so different people would do different things. Like one group went axe throwing, one group went to, goes to movies or meals and that sort of thing.
So it's basically you, I mean, this doesn't sound nice. In a nice way, you're forcing people to hang out. Like you're strongly encouraging people to get together, but you don't necessarily have to be there, or you don't necessarily have to be the one to facilitate it.
Right. We try to set up. So again, my goal is to set up the structure and the culture, the environment to meet them where they are, in order for them to, we want to grow in community, but also obviously we want to grow towards the Lord in community. That's the goal.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But I view my role as the leader, especially in my stage in life now, to be more of the one who tries to create that culture and that environment and help make it happen. I don't need to be participating in all the things. So.
Do you have any advice, let's say just for the whole spectrum, from the young kid, maybe in high school, college, wanting to lead a group, to the person later in life who might be more experienced and ready to mentor people? But if you were speaking to small group leaders in general, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, I have a few pieces of advice, I guess. On the practical end, I think it's really important to be resilient and have a focus on, doing a small group because it's what the Lord wants you to do, and then being that leader that's going to do it every time, no matter if one person shows up or 20 people show up, or you need to change the group style or whatever it is. But have that goal in mind and have the understanding that the Lord has called you to it, and then stick with it. The other, I guess, more spiritual, mystical principle that I would put out there is that, in general, as a principle, I view that it's important. So let's say your small group is an hour and a half a week, meets for an hour and a half once a week. The principle that I try to put forth is, then you should probably be praying for about an hour and a half once a week for your group. So however long you meet, that's the principle that I try to follow, is like, however long you're meeting, try to meet that with prayer, so that it's really not about, it's not, because there's so many small
and you're
groups.
talking about you praying for the people in the small group. You're not talking about the small group praying together, right? You're saying that as the leader, if the small group is going to be 90 minutes, then over the course of the week, I want to set aside, maybe it's 20 minutes every day, or however you allot the time, X amount of time to actually spend praying for the members of the group.
Yeah, whether it's praying for the members, praying for the group itself, praying for that meeting. But yes, somehow praying and basically handing over that time to the Lord and saying, this is your group. I can prepare, I can meet with them, but really taking it and giving that same time to the Lord and saying, hey, this is yours, dialoguing with the Lord about it.
Nice. What else do you have? Any other tips, advice?
Yeah, I think the other piece of advice is just to lead by example. Have a plan in place make sure you have feedback, and then just lead by example. Like I remember one.
How do you get feedback? Because a lot of people aren't going to be willing to be honest if your group, if they're not having fun, no one wants to hurt your feelings on purpose, right? So how do you get people to give you honest feedback?
Oh yeah, so I guess we would do surveys at the end of some of our groups. Sometimes I would get feedback by just being observing and being like, "Hey, you haven't come for a while. What's going on?" And just asking them. You're like, "You're not going to hurt my feelings." Like, and part of it is setting up. Like, I love setting up the context for rejection. Just like I've been rejected. Only 3
what
out
is
of
wrong
10.
with you? Oh,
Well,
man.
only 3 out of 10 people come to the group. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, so 7 out of 10 have rejected me. So don't worry about it. If you, I'm used to rejection, but no, like, just giving people the space to say no, and then being able to ask them, hey, like, it's fine. Like, if this isn't for you, I can help you find something else, or how else can we help you or support you, and just get the feedback, right? Just through being vulnerable and authentic. Yeah, and then the other feedback that you can get sometimes is like, I'm mentoring a guy who's leading a small group now, and so I'll meet with him and I'll ask him about the group. Whoa, what are you guys doing? Oh, how did this go? How did that go? And even though I don't attend his group, I'm able to give him feedback just by how he's telling me, and I'm able to ask him questions and try to draw out certain dynamics within his small group.
Yeah, and that's huge. I think if you're fortunate enough to have someone in your life who can mentor you or who can speak into your life, that as you're leading others, it's really, really nice and not always available, right? But if it is, it's certainly a blessing to have someone ministering to you and speaking into your life as you're trying to minister to this other group.
Yeah, and then to learn from them and their example. But yeah, that's been helpful.
Awesome. Any other advice, tips?
I'm not sure. Have fun.
Okay.
Yeah, have fun. Take joy in it, and don't take yourself too seriously. Walk together with the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's your goal of making it like family. Like family is different than business, Family isn't business. Like family, there's a real joy in family, and I suppose if you're doing it right, that's awesome. All right, Chris, my last question was, you've been in a lot of small group meetings, or even the meetings that you scheduled and no one showed up for, or one person showed up for, or whatever. But let's say that you were going to describe, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most amazing small group meeting you've ever been a part of, what does that look like and feel like for you? Like when you get done with the meeting and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Like tell us what that would be like for you. What would your 10 small group meeting be?
Yeah, my 10 out of 10. I think it varies. It's varied for me over the course of time. And it's because, in different stages in life that we just have different needs and we're just at different places. So in my like college years, or in my 20s even, like the ideal group would be one that's like, oh, we're going to worship all night and we're going to like be praying. And then when we look up, the sun's coming up. Like,
Nice.
like within the group, there's different relationships where there's confession of sin. That's been really big. Is just having people who really know you and have your back and are going to advocate for you and root for you in struggles and in victories. So I think that's been really big, especially in those, the 20 years of the 20s. And the reason why I say the 20s is because once you have a family, it becomes a little bit of a different feel, I feel like, for small groups, where you can't just meet someone at the same level because you have a broader diversity of age and, potentially of gender. So for now, where I am now, an ideal small group is not that is not staying up all night.
Yeah, you got to get out of my house because my kids got to go to sleep.
Yeah, I would love. I still love that, and that's great. But yeah, I don't know if my wife would love that or my son would love that necessarily. Yeah, it's so where we are now is I really view small groups as a family, and each member being important and wanting connection for each member. So the ideal small group now at my stage in life is a group where, hey, my son can be involved and he can be engaged, and my wife can have in meaningful relationships, and I also can have deep and meaningful relationships, and that also grow us towards God, that orient us towards God. So, like, I guess when you think of, so the analogy is when you get together, you have a meeting or a gathering or an assembly, and I like the word assembly because it's the concept of being assembled together. And so, when I was in my 20s or in college, everyone's pretty similar, and so the parts are similar. But now in my stage in life, I feel like the parts are different, and so to see them assemble together and grow towards God, it's like almost an assembly more than it is just a meeting or a getting together. So to me, that's more of the ideal, is everyone's able to grow, everybody's able to be a part of it and come together and move forward and do life together with the Lord. And I guess the other piece that shouldn't be left out with that assembling piece is, like, there's gifts, right? And in the Lord, and part of I think a 10 out of 10 small group, a spiritual group, is assembling together with those gifts as part of it. So the Lord has given us all different gifts, and He's given us to be gifts as well to the church. And so the full gamut of gifts, I think, has to be part of a 10 out of 10 group.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daryl.
Good to talk to you, Chris. Really appreciate you, man. Thanks.
Breeze that blows and every stream that flows, we hear your tenderness in every star that glows, in every cell that grows. It's clear